At 5 years old, my parents left me alone at the food court of Lenox Square Mall with nothing but a sticky note pinned to my jacket that read, "I cannot afford her anymore." 30 years later, they reappeared, not to apologize, but to sue me for $3 million my adoptive father left behind. They walked into court smirking, thinking they were about to crush a helpless, lonely woman. They had no idea who I had become. When their own lawyer walked in, saw me sitting at the bench, and dropped his briefcase in terror, they finally realized their mistake. "Good morning, Judge Sterling," he stammered, while my biological parents looked around in confusion. "Before I tell you how I sent my own family to prison, let me know where you are watching from in the comments below. Hit like and subscribe if you have ever had to build your own empire from the ashes of betrayal." My name is Jasmine Sterling, but to the people in this room, I was just Jazz, the charity case. Standing in the small, quiet sanctuary of the Ebenezer Baptist Church, I looked down at the peaceful face of the man who had actually raised me. Otis Sterling was not a man of loud words or flashy clothes. He was a school janitor who wore gray work uniforms for 40 years and smelled of pine cleaner and peppermint candy. He was the one who found me shivering by the mall fountain. He was the one who taught me that dignity has nothing to do with the brand on your shirt. The casket was simple oak, unpolished and honest, just like him. I adjusted the single spray of white chrysanthemums on the lid, his favorite flower, because they were resilient and bloomed even in the cold. The silence in the church was heavy and comforting. It was just me and a few of his old friends from the school district sitting in the back pews with their heads bowed. I took a deep breath, trying to steady the shaking in my hands. I wanted this moment to be perfect for him. I wanted him to have the peace in death that he worked so hard to give me in life. Suddenly, the heavy double doors at the back of the church flew open with a violence that made the old wood groan. A beam of harsh sunlight cut through the dim, respectful atmosphere, followed by the click-clack of high heels on the hardwood floor. I did not have to turn around to know who it was. The scent of cheap, overpowering perfume mixed with the stale odor of cigarettes drifted up the aisle before they even reached me. "Oh, Otis, my brother, my dear, sweet brother." The wail was theatrical, designed to turn heads. It was Latoya, my biological mother. She came rushing down the center aisle, wearing a black dress that was far too tight and far too short for a funeral. She was draped in gold jewelry that I knew was fake, the kind that turns your skin green if you sweat too much. Behind her walked Darnell, my biological father, wearing a suit that shined under the church lights and dark sunglasses even though we were indoors. Trailing behind them were Ebony, my younger sister, and her husband, Kyle. Ebony had her phone out, holding it high in the air, recording herself with a tragic expression on her face. I could practically see the caption she was typing in her head, probably something about heartbreak and family legacy. Kyle looked bored, chewing gum with his mouth open, wearing a t-shirt under a blazer that looked like he had pulled it out of a hamper. They moved like a storm, disrupting everything in their path. The few elderly mourners in the back rows shifted uncomfortably, clutching their purses tighter. I stepped away from the casket, placing myself between Otis and this circus. My heart was pounding, not with grief anymore, but with a cold, sharp rage. Latoya threw herself against the side of the casket, sobbing dry tears. "Thank you, Otis. Thank you for raising our burden when we could not," she screamed, looking directly at Ebony's phone camera. "Now we have come to take her back. We have come to claim what belongs to the Jenkins family." I watched her performance with a detachment that frightened me. 30 years of silence, and now she was playing the grieving mother for likes on social media. "Please," I said, my voice low and steady. "This is a private service. You are not invited." Darnell stepped forward, looming over me. He was a big man who used his size to intimidate everyone around him. He lowered his sunglasses just enough for me to see his bloodshot eyes. "Invited?" he scoffed, his voice dripping with disdain. "Listen here, little girl. We do not need an invitation. We are family. I am your father. That woman crying her heart out is your mother. You do not tell us where we can and cannot go." I stood my ground. The polished floorboards beneath my feet felt like the only solid thing in the world. "You are not family," I said, looking him straight in the eye. "Family shows up. Family does not leave a child next to a trash can at a mall. Otis was my family, and I will not let you turn his homegoing service into a reality TV show." Kyle stepped up from the back, laughing, as if I had told a joke. He walked past me and kicked the stand holding the white chrysanthemums. The vase wobbled, and petals scattered onto the floor. "Look at this sad little arrangement," Kyle sneered, looking around the empty church. "No organ player, no choir, just some grocery store flowers and a wooden box. I guess the old man died just like he lived, broke and pathetic. It is a good thing we are here to add some class to this poverty fest." The insult to Otis stung more than anything they could have said to me. Otis had saved every penny he ever earned. He drove a 20-year-old truck so he could pay for my piano lessons. He fixed his own roof so he could buy me encyclopedias. He was richer in character than Kyle could ever hope to be in 1,000 lifetimes. "Pick them up," I said, my voice dropping an octave. Kyle smirked, crossing his arms. "Or what, Jasmine? What are you going to do? You are just a lonely little woman with no friends and a dead janitor daddy. You should be grateful we even showed up. Most people would have forgotten you existed." Ebony chimed in from behind her phone screen, never stopping the recording. "Seriously, Jazz, stop being so dramatic. We are here to support you. And to make sure Dad's assets are handled by people who actually understand finance. We know you probably cannot even balance a checkbook." The audacity was breathtaking. I wanted to scream. I wanted to tell them that I graduated top of my class from law school. I wanted to tell them that I spent my days deciding the fates of men far more dangerous than Darnell. But I kept my mouth shut. Otis always taught me that silence is a weapon, if you know how to use it. I stepped closer to Darnell, ignoring Kyle. "Get out," I whispered. "Get out before I have you removed." Darnell laughed, a harsh, barking sound that echoed off the vaulted ceiling. "Removed by who?" "The police. Go ahead, call them. I will tell them I am grieving my brother. I will tell them my ungrateful daughter is trying to keep me from paying my respects. Who do you think they will believe? The grieving parents or the cold-hearted bitch who abandoned her own blood?" Latoya stopped her fake crying instantly, snapping her head up. "Do not you dare speak to your father that way," she hissed, her eyes narrowing. "We gave you life. My blood runs through your veins. That makes me your legal guardian, in the eyes of God and the state. Whatever that old janitor left behind belongs to the family that created you. We are doing you a favor, Jazz. We are here to manage things. You are not smart enough to handle the real world." She reached out to touch my face, her long, fake nails coming dangerously close to my eyes. I flinched back. "Do not touch me," I warned. "You used to beg me to hold you," Latoya sneered. You were such a needy child, always crying, always wanting. I see nothing has changed. Still selfish, still thinking the world revolves around you." The gaslighting was suffocating. They were rewriting history right in front of me, trying to make me question my own reality. But I was not 5 years old anymore. I was not the scared little girl waiting by the Sbarro pizza counter for parents who never came back. I was about to respond. I was about to unleash 30 years of anger when the sound of a throat clearing cut through the tension. "Excuse me." We all turned. Standing at the pulpit was Mr. Harrison. He was wearing a suit that was at least a decade old, slightly frayed at the cuffs, but his posture was straight as a steel rod. He was the only lawyer Otis ever trusted, mostly because Harrison charged him $20 for a will and treated him like a king. Darnell looked Harrison up and down and snorted. "Who is this? The Undertaker?" "I am the executor of Mr. Sterling's estate," Harrison said, his voice calm but projecting clearly to the back of the room. "And I would ask that you all take a seat. Mr. Sterling left very specific instructions for this moment." Ebony rolled her eyes, lowering her phone slightly. "Instructions like what? How to sweep a floor properly?" Latoya giggled, covering her mouth with her hand. "Oh, stop it, baby. Be respectful. We need to hear what the man has to say. Maybe he left us his mop collection." They laughed. All four of them stood there beside the body of the man who saved my life, cracking jokes about his poverty. Harrison did not flinch. He adjusted his glasses and looked at me. His eyes were kind, full of a secret that only he and I knew. "Jasmine, if you are ready," he said, ignoring the Jenkins completely. I nodded, taking a deep breath. I walked over to the front pew and sat down alone. My back was straight, my hands folded in my lap. The Jenkins family scrambled for the seats in the row behind me. I could hear the rustle of their clothes and the squeak of the pew as Darnell threw his heavy frame onto it. "Move over, Kyle," muttered to Ebony. "I want to hear how much the insurance payout is. Even if it is just $5,000, that is a down payment on the boat." "Shh," Latoya hissed. "Let the man speak. We have to look sad for the camera." Harrison pressed a button on a small remote. A projector screen slowly lowered from the ceiling, humming in the silence. "Mr. Sterling recorded a video will 1 week before his passing," Harrison announced. "He wished for it to be played at the start of his service, before any other words were spoken." I fixed my eyes on the blank white screen. I felt a strange vibration in the air, the kind of pressure drop that happens right before a tornado touches down. Behind me, the Jenkins family was shifting restlessly, already bored, already calculating how quickly they could cash a check and leave. They saw a janitor. They saw a victim. They saw a payday. As the screen flickered to life, showing Otis sitting in his favorite armchair, I closed my eyes for a brief second. They had no idea that the man on that screen was about to destroy their entire worldview. And they certainly had no idea that the daughter they called useless was the one holding the match. The video crackled, and Otis's voice, warm and steady, filled the room. "My name is Otis Sterling, and if you are watching this, it means I have gone home to glory." Behind me, Darnell yawned loudly. "Get to the money, old man," he muttered. I opened my eyes and stared at the screen. The storm was here. The screen flickered, and there was Otis. He was sitting in his worn-out recliner, wearing his gray work uniform with the name patch on the chest that read Sterling. He looked tired, but his eyes were bright and kind. He cleared his throat and looked directly into the camera lens, which meant he was looking directly at me. "My sweet Jasmine," he began, his voice raspy and warm. "If you are watching this, it means my time has come. Do not cry for me, baby girl. I have had a good life, a full life, because of you. I know you worried about me saving every penny. You always told me to buy a new truck or take a vacation. But I had a secret mission. I wanted to make sure that the world could never hurt you again the way it did when you were 5. I felt a tear slide down my cheek, but I did not wipe it away. Behind me, the church was silent, but I could feel the tension radiating from the pews where the Jenkins family sat. They were leaning forward, waiting for the punchline. Otis continued, on the screen, "I was just a janitor, Jasmine. People looked through me like I was a window. They talked about money and stocks in front of me like I was too simple to understand. But I listened. I listened to the teachers talk about Apple in the 90s. I listened to the principal talk about Amazon when it was just a bookstore. And every month, I put a little bit away, just a little bit at a time." Mr. Harrison paused the video. The image of Otis smiling froze on the screen. The lawyer picked up a thick document from the podium. He adjusted his glasses and looked over the rim at the small congregation. "Mr. Sterling lived modestly," Harrison said, his tone professional and dry. "However, he was an astute investor. The house on MLK Boulevard is fully paid off and has been appraised at $450,000 due to recent gentrification in the area." I heard a sharp intake of breath behind me. That was LaToya. $450,000 was a lot of money to them, but it was not life-changing. Harrison turned the page. "But the bulk of the estate lies in the investment portfolio Mr. Sterling managed quietly for 30 years. As of the closing bell yesterday afternoon, the total value of the stocks and bonds bequeathed solely to his adopted daughter, Jasmine Sterling, is $3,245,000. The silence that followed was absolute. It was the kind of silence that happens after a bomb goes off before the debris starts to fall. I sat there, stunned. I knew Otis had saved, but I had no idea. He had built a fortress of security for me while scrubbing floors and emptying trash cans. Then the explosion happened. What Kyle shouted, his voice cracking. $3 million! I heard the sound of a hymnal dropping to the floor. Then, suddenly, the heavy footsteps of Darnell coming toward me. The atmosphere in the church shifted violently. The air, which had been thick with boredom and disdain, was now electric with greed. Before I could even process the number, Darnell was beside me. He did not look angry anymore. The sneer was gone, replaced by a wide, terrifying grin that showed too many teeth. Jasmine baby Darnell boomed, reaching out to wrap his heavy arms around my shoulders. He smelled of stale tobacco and desperation. "Did you hear that? My God, God is good. I knew it. I knew that man was taking good care of you. For us." I stiffened, freezing under his touch. My skin crawled. Just 5 minutes ago, I was a bitch and a charity case. Now I was his beloved daughter. LaToya was right behind him. The tears were gone instantly, as if someone had turned off a faucet. Her eyes were wide and hungry, darting from me to the lawyer to the screen where Otis was paused. "Oh, praise Jesus!" she shouted, throwing her hands up. "It is a miracle! Jasmine, honey, look at you! You are set for life! We are set for life!" She tried to squeeze into the pew beside me, pushing her hip against mine. Her voice dropped to a conspiratorial whisper, loud enough for Harrison to hear. "Now listen, baby girl. You are young. You do not know how to handle this kind of money. $3 million is a heavy burden. It attracts wolves. But do not you worry. Mommy and Daddy are here now. We will manage it for you. We will set up a trust, family-controlled, of course. You can have a nice allowance, maybe $5,000 a month to play with. Does not that sound nice? Ebony appeared on my other side, her phone now tucked into her purse. The recording had stopped the moment real money was mentioned. She looked at me with a newfound respect that made me sick to my stomach. "Jazz," she said, her voice sugary sweet. "Oh my God, I am so happy for you. Seriously, you deserve it. By the way, you know that credit card debt I told you about? It is practically nothing compared to this, just $50,000. If you could clear that for me, it would be like a fresh start for us sisters. We could go shopping in Paris. We could finally bond." Kyle leaned over the back of the pew, his gum chewing accelerated to a frantic pace. "Do not listen to the women, Jazz," he said, winking at me. "You need a man as perspective. Real estate is where it is at. Me and Darnell have been talking about this boat rental business. Guaranteed returns. We just need $1 million to start up. We will double your money in a year. We are family, right? We help each other." I looked at them. I looked at their eager, sweating faces. They were not seeing me. They were seeing a walking ATM. They were seeing a lottery ticket they thought they had lost, but just found in the washing machine. They truly believed that because we shared DNA, they were entitled to the fruit of Otis's labor. They thought I was stupid. They thought I was desperate for their love. I stood up slowly, pushing Darnell's heavy arm off my shoulder. I smoothed down my black dress. I walked to the center of the aisle and turned to face them. Otis was still smiling on the screen behind me, watching over me. I looked at Darnell, who was already calculating the price of a new Mercedes in his head. I looked at LaToya, who was probably planning which mansion she would move into. "I am 35 years old," I said, my voice echoing in the hollow space. "I am not a child, and I have a very good memory." LaToya's smile faltered slightly. "Now, Jazz, do not start dwelling on the past. We are talking about the future." I took a step closer to her. "The past is why we are here, LaToya. Do you remember Lenox Square Mall? Do you remember the food court?" Darnell waved his hand dismissively. "That was a misunderstanding. We told you." I cut him off, my voice rising. "It was December. I was wearing a red coat that was too small for me. You told me to wait by the pizza stand while you went to get pretzels. I waited for 6 hours. I waited until the mall closed. I waited until the security guard called the police." I had a sticky note in my pocket, Darnell. Do you remember what it said? Darnell's jaw tightened. His eyes went cold behind his sunglasses again. "It said, 'I cannot afford her anymore,'" I whispered. "You threw me away like a piece of trash because I cost too much. You traded your daughter for a freedom that you wasted on cheap liquor and bad decisions." The church was deadly silent now. Even Kyle had stopped chewing his gum. "Otis picked me up," I said, pointing to the screen. "Otis worked double shifts to buy me braces. Otis wore the same shoes for 5 years so I could go to college. This money is his sweat. It is his blood. It is his love." I looked LaToya dead in the eye. "And the answer is no. Not 1 cent. Not 1 penny. You will not touch his legacy. You will not get a boat, Kyle. You will not get a shopping trip, Ebony. And Darnell, you will not get a single dime to gamble away." I turned to walk away, signaling to Mr. Harrison that we were done. Darnell lunged forward, grabbing my wrist. His grip was painful bruising. The mask of the loving father had completely disintegrated, revealing the bully beneath. "You listen to me, you ungrateful little bitch," he hissed, spitting the words at me. "You are my daughter. That money belongs to the family estate. You think you can just walk away with millions while your flesh and blood suffer? I will sue you. I will drag you to court. In the state of Georgia, a biological parent has rights, especially when the child is mentally unstable." He squeezed my wrist harder. "And we all know you have always been a little crazy, Jasmine. We will testify. We will tell the judge you manipulated a senile old man. We will take it all." I looked down at his hand on my wrist, then up at his face. He thought he was threatening a helpless girl. He did not know he was threatening a superior court judge. "Let go of me," I said quietly, "or you will regret it for the rest of your life." Darnell laughed, but he let go, shoving me back. "I will see you in court," he shouted as I turned my back on them. "Get ready to lose everything." I walked out of the church into the blinding Atlanta sun, leaving them screaming at the altar of a God they did not believe in. They wanted a war. They had no idea they had just declared it on a general. The heat of the Atlanta afternoon hit me like a physical blow as I pushed open the heavy wooden doors of the church. My eyes adjusted to the blinding sunlight reflecting off the asphalt of the parking lot. I just wanted to get to my car. I wanted to get to the sanctuary of my sturdy 10-year-old Volvo, sit in the silence, and finally let myself grieve for Otis. But they were not going to let me have even that small mercy. I saw them before I reached my car. They were leaning against the hood of my silver sedan, like a gang of high school bullies waiting for the nerd to come out of class. Kyle was picking his teeth with a business card. LaToya was fanning herself with a church program. Darnell stood with his arms crossed, his biceps straining against the fabric of his suit jacket. As I approached, I clicked the unlock button on my key fob. The lights flashed, but Kyle did not move. He stayed right where he was, blocking the driver's side door. "Excuse me," I said, keeping my voice flat. "You are leaning on my car." Kyle chuckled, looking me up and down with that same smirk he had worn in the church. "Come on, Jazz, do not be like that. We just want to talk strategy. Me and Darnell were talking while the old man was blabbering on screen. We have a vision." He pushed off the car and took a step toward me, invading my personal space. I could smell the spearmint gum masking the scent of stale beer. "We are thinking about a luxury car wash chain," he said, spreading his hands as if visualizing the sign. "Premier locations only. Buckhead, Midtown. We handle the operations, you put up the capital. 1 million cash injection. We will cut you in for 10% of the profits. It is a no-brainer. Keep the money in the family, right?" I stared at him. He wanted $1 million to wash cars. He wanted a third of Otis's life work to fund a pipe dream that would bankrupt within 6 months. "I am not investing in anything, Kyle," I said, reaching for the door handle. "Move." That was when LaToya made her move. She did not yell this time. Instead, she let out a broken sob and collapsed onto the hot pavement right in front of me. She fell to her knees, scraping her expensive stockings against the concrete. She grabbed the hem of my skirt, her fake nails digging into the fabric. "Jasmine, please," she wailed, looking up at me with mascara running down her cheeks. "You have to understand, baby. I was sick. When we left you at the mall, I was not in my right mind. I had postpartum depression. I had anxiety. The demons were chasing me, Jazz. I thought I was doing the right thing, giving you a chance at a better life. She buried her face in my skirt, rocking back and forth. The performance was Oscar-worthy. If I did not know the truth, I might have believed her. But I knew. I remembered the day they left me. I remembered Latoya laughing as she tried on sunglasses at the kiosk. I remembered Darnell talking about a party in Miami they needed to get to. There were no demons. There was no depression. There was just selfishness and a desire to be free of a child who needed to be fed and clothed. "Get up, Latoya," I said coldly, pulling my skirt from her grip. "You were not sick. You were going to South Beach. I found the postcards you sent to Aunt Sarah." Latoya stopped crying instantly. She looked up at me, her eyes dry and hard. The mask slipped for a second, revealing the predator underneath. "You ungrateful little witch," she hissed. "I carried you for 9 months. I ruined my body for you. You owe me. You owe me everything." I unlocked the car door and opened it. "I owe you nothing. Otis paid my debt." I slid into the driver's seat, the leather burning my skin through my thin dress. I tried to pull the door shut, but a heavy hand slammed against the window, preventing it from closing. Darnell was leaning down, his face inches from mine. The sunglasses were off now. His eyes were bloodshot and full of a terrifying rage. He was not playing the grieving father anymore. He was the enforcer. He reached into the inside pocket of his suit jacket. For a second, my heart stopped, thinking he had a weapon. But he pulled out a folded piece of yellowing paper. It was soft at the creases worn down by time. He unfolded it with deliberate slowness and pressed it against the glass of my window. It was a birth certificate. "Look at the name," Darnell growled, tapping the paper with his thick finger. "Jasmine Marie Jenkins. You see that name? That is my name. That is my blood." He leaned closer, his breath fogging up the glass. "You can play high and mighty all you want, little girl, but the law is the law. In the state of Georgia, blood matters. You are a Jenkins, and everything a Jenkins has belongs to the head of the house. That is me." He straightened up, towering over the car. "If you do not cut that check," Darnell shouted, loud enough for people in the parking lot to hear, "I will make your life a living hell. I know people in this city, Jasmine. I know where you live. I know where you work. I will drag your name through the mud until you cannot get a job scrubbing toilets, let alone whatever secretarial work you do. I will paint you as the villain who stole from her own dying parents. You will not be able to show your face in Atlanta when I am done with you." My hands gripped the steering wheel so tight, my knuckles turned white. He was threatening to destroy my reputation. He was threatening to ruin the career I had built with blood, sweat, and tears. He thought I was a nobody. He thought he could bully me into submission because he held a piece of paper from 35 years ago. I rolled down the window just an inch. The air conditioning blasted against my face, mixing with the humid air outside. "You are wrong, Darnell," I said, my voice steady despite the adrenaline coursing through my veins. I reached into my purse and pulled out my wallet. I didn't open it. I just held it up. "Otis adopted me legally when I was 12, I said, looking him dead in the eye. We stood before a judge in courtroom 4B. I remember it perfectly. The judge asked me what I wanted my name to be, and I told him I wanted the name of the man who actually loved me. I leaned closer to the crack in the window. "My name is Jasmine Sterling. That piece of paper you are holding is trash, just like your threats. Darnell's face turned a shade of purple I had never seen before. He slammed his fist against the roof of my car, leaving a dent. "You little liar!" he roared, reaching for the door handle. "Open this door!" I didn't wait. I slammed the car into reverse. The tires screeched against the asphalt. Kyle, who had been leaning against the rear bumper, jumped back just in time, losing his balance and falling onto the pavement. "Watch it, you crazy bitch!" Kyle screamed, scrambling to his feet. I shifted into drive and floored it. I did not look back. In my rearview mirror, I saw Darnell standing in the middle of the parking lot, shaking his fist at my retreating car. LaToya was dusting off her knees, looking at her ruined stockings. They looked small. They looked pathetic. But I knew better than to underestimate a cornered animal. They were hungry, and they had smelled blood. This was not the end. It was just the opening skirmish. I drove for 20 minutes before my heart rate slowed down. I drove past the skyscrapers of downtown Atlanta, past the gold dome of the Capitol building where I had been sworn in just last month. None of them knew. They thought I was a secretary or a clerk. They had no idea they had just threatened a sitting judge. I pulled into the driveway of Otis's house. It was a small brick bungalow in a quiet neighborhood that was slowly being gentrified. The lawn was perfectly manicured, just the way Otis liked it. The hydrangeas were in full bloom. I walked inside and locked the door behind me. I leaned against the cool wood, breathing in the scent of lemon polish and old books. This was my sanctuary. This was the only place I had ever felt safe. But as I walked into the living room, my pocket started to vibrate. It started with a single buzz, then another, then a continuous stream of vibrations that made my phone feel like a live wire against my hip. I pulled it out. My screen was lit up with notifications. Text messages from numbers I did not recognize were scrolling past faster than I could read them. "We saw the video. You are disgusting. How could you do that to your own mother? Die, you greedy witch. Give the money back to your family." I felt a cold pit form in my stomach. I opened Instagram. My notifications were blown up. Ebony had tagged me. She had not only posted the video of her crying in the church, but she had also posted my phone number, my personal email address, and a photo of my car. "Help me convince my sister to do the right thing," the caption read, followed by a string of heartbroken emojis. I scrolled through the comments. There were thousands of them. People I had never met. Strangers from all over the country were calling me names I will not repeat. They were threatening to come to my house. They were analyzing my facial expressions in the video, calling me cold, calling me a sociopath. Ebony had weaponized the internet against me. She had unleashed a mob of keyboard warriors who only knew her side of the story. My first instinct was to throw the phone across the room. I wanted to curl up on Otis's recliner and cry. I wanted to turn off the lights and hide. That is what the 5-year-old girl in the mall would have done. But I was not 5. I walked over to the dining table and sat down. I placed the phone face down on the polished wood, silencing the noise. I took a deep breath, centering myself. I opened my laptop. The blue light illuminated the darkening room. I did not log into social media. I did not try to defend myself in the comments section. Judges do not argue in the court of public opinion. We argue in the court of law. I logged into the secure database using my credentials. The seal of the Superior Court appeared on the screen. I typed in the name, Kyle Anderson. I watched the loading bar spin. "You want to play dirty, family?" I whispered to the empty room. "Let us see what you are hiding." The results popped up. A long list of civil suits, a bankruptcy filing from 3 years ago, and then something interesting. A pending investigation for fraud involving a construction company in Marietta. I opened a new tab. I typed in Darnell Jenkins. Tax liens, 3 of them. Unpaid child support for a child I didn't even know existed in Alabama. I typed in Latoya Jenkins. The screen filled with disability claims. She had been collecting checks for a bad back for 10 years. The same back she used to drop to her knees in the parking lot. The same back she used to dance on TikTok videos with Ebony. I sat back in my chair. A cold calm washed over me. I was not the victim here. They thought they were hunting a gazelle, but they had just walked into the den of a lioness. I started printing. The rhythmic sound of the printer was the only music I needed. "Keep texting me, Ebony," I thought as I watched the pages of evidence stack up. "Keep posting, Darnell. Every threat you make is just another nail in your coffin." I picked up a red pen and started circling dates. The night was just beginning, and I had a lot of work to do. They wanted a fight. I was going to give them a war. And I was going to make sure they paid for every single tear I shed 30 years ago. I woke up the next morning to the sound of a digital assassination. My phone, which I had left face down on the dining table, was vibrating so intensely it was actually moving across the polished wood surface. It sounded like an angry hornet trapped in a jar. I picked it up with a sense of dread that settled heavy in my stomach. The notifications were a blur of red badges: Instagram, TikTok, Twitter, my email inbox. They were all overflowing. I opened TikTok first because I knew exactly where the poison was coming from. And there it was. Ebony had been busy while I slept. She had posted a video at 3 a.m, and it already had 2 million views. The thumbnail was a close-up of her tear-streaked face with the caption, "The truth about my millionaire sister." I pressed play. A sad, manipulative piano track began to play in the background, the kind used in animal shelter commercials. The video opened with a grainy clip from the funeral. It was the moment I had turned my back on them to walk away. Ebony had edited it perfectly. She had cut out Darnell gripping my wrist. She had cut out Kyle kicking the flowers. She had only kept the part where I looked cold and unfeeling, walking away from my crying mother. Then the video cut to Ebony sitting on her bed, wrapped in a blanket, looking small and vulnerable. "Hey guys," she whispered, wiping at her dry eyes. "I did not want to make this video. I really did not. But I cannot stay silent while my parents suffer. My sister Jasmine just inherited $3 million from our late adoptive father. And that is great for her. But what you guys do not know is that she forced my parents to sign away their rights when they were sick. She manipulated a senile old man to change his will. And now, when Mom needs heart surgery, Jasmine laughed in her face. She told us to die in the street." My jaw dropped. Heart surgery? Latoya had never had a heart problem in her life, unless you counted having a heart of stone. Ebony continued. "We are not asking for much. We just wanted to be a family again. But money changes people. It is sad to see how greed can turn your own flesh and blood into a monster. Please share this so everyone knows the truth about Jasmine Sterling." I scrolled down to the comments. It was a bloodbath. Black Twitter had gotten hold of it, and they were merciless. One comment read, "Imagine letting your own mother die while you sit on millions. Trash behavior." Another said, "She looks evil in that clip. You can see it in her eyes. Karma will get her. Someone had even found my LinkedIn profile and posted a screenshot. This woman works at the courthouse downtown. We should flood her employer with calls until she gets fired. I felt a wave of nausea wash over me. It was not just a lie. It was a calculated destruction of my character. Ebony knew exactly what buttons to push. She played the victim card, the health crisis card, and the family loyalty card all at once. She had painted a target on my back and handed the internet a loaded gun. I put the phone down, my hands shaking slightly, not from fear, but from a cold, simmering rage. They were trying to try me in the court of public opinion because they knew they would lose in a court of law. They wanted to shame me into submission. They wanted me to panic, to call them begging for it to stop, to write them a check just to make the noise go away. But they had forgotten who I was. I deal with liars for a living. I listen to fabricated stories every single day, and I knew that the louder someone screams, the more they have to hide. I did not reply. I did not report the video. Instead, I screen recorded the entire thing. I took screenshots of the most violent threats in the comments, especially the ones that mentioned my workplace. I saved everything to a secure cloud folder labeled Evidence. I needed to get out of the house. The walls felt like they were closing in on me. I needed to feel normal, even if just for an hour. I decided to go to the grocery store. I put on a baseball cap and oversized sunglasses, trying to look unlike the woman in the viral video. I drove to the Whole Foods in Midtown, a place where people usually kept to themselves. The automatic doors slid open, and I was hit with the scent of organic produce and fresh coffee. It should have been comforting. But as I pushed my cart down the aisle, the atmosphere felt wrong. The store was crowded, and I kept feeling eyes on me. Paranoia pricked at the back of my neck. I turned into the cereal aisle, and that is when I heard it. That is her. I froze. 2 women were standing near the granola, holding their phones up. They were looking at me, then looking at their screens, then looking back at me. One of them whispered loudly, "The one from TikTok, the daughter who stole the money." I kept walking, keeping my head down, focusing on the boxes of oatmeal. Just ignore them, Jazz. Do not engage. I turned the corner toward the dairy section and nearly collided with a man pushing a cart full of beer. He was tall, wearing a faded jersey. He stopped and looked at me. His eyes narrowed in recognition. "Hey," he said, his voice loud enough to turn heads. "You are Jasmine, right? The Jenkins girl." I gripped the handle of my cart tighter. "Excuse me, I need to get by." He did not move. He blocked my path. "I saw what you did to your mama," he said, sneering. "You think you were better than everyone because you got paid? You represent everything wrong with people today. No respect for your elders, no loyalty." People were stopping to watch now. Phones were coming out. I could see the little red recording lights blinking. They were waiting for a reaction. They wanted the angry black woman. They wanted a scene that would confirm everything Ebony had said. I took a deep breath, letting the cold air of the refrigeration unit ground me. "Sir, please move your cart," I said calmly. He laughed a harsh, ugly sound. "Or what? You gonna sue me too? You gonna let me die of a heart attack like your mama?" Then he did something that made time stand stop. He leaned forward, gathered saliva in his mouth, and spit on my cart, right next to my hand. A glob of spittle landed on the handle, inches from my skin. "You disgust me," he muttered. The silence in the aisle was deafening. The onlookers gasped. My heart hammered against my ribs like a trapped bird. Every instinct in my body screamed at me to react. The girl from the streets wanted to grab a wine bottle and smash it over his head. The woman who had been abandoned wanted to scream, but the judge inside me took control. I looked at the spit. I looked at his face contorted with self-righteous hate, and I slowly reached into my pocket. I did not pull out a weapon. I pulled out my phone. I held it up steady as a rock and took a clear, high-resolution photo of his face. Then I took a video panning down to the spit on the cart and back up to him. "What are you doing?" he barked, stepping back slightly unnerved by my silence. "Documenting assault and harassment," I said. My voice was not loud, but it carried the weight of a gavel striking a block. "Smile! You are going to be famous too." I turned to the stunned onlookers who were still filming. "Make sure you tag him," I said to them. "I am sure his employer would love to see how he treats women in grocery stores." The man turned pale. He mumbled a curse word and shoved his cart past me, fleeing the scene. I did not chase him. I did not shout. I simply took a sanitizing wipe from my purse, cleaned the handle of my cart, and walked to the checkout. Inside, I was shaking. Outside, I was granite. I drove home in silence, my knuckles white on the steering wheel. They were escalating. Ebony words had real-world consequences. That man felt justified in assaulting me because of a lie he saw on a screen. If I had been weaker, if I had been the person they thought I was, that incident would have broken me. It would have sent me spiraling into depression or provoked me into a fight that would have landed me in jail. But they had made a fatal miscalculation. They thought they were isolating me. In reality, they were just handing me more ammunition. I was barely through the front door when my phone rang again. It was a secure line. The caller ID read, "Superior Court of Fulton County." I answered immediately. "This is Sterling." "Judge Sterling, thank God." It was Mrs. Gable, the head clerk of the court. She sounded breathless, panic edging her usually composed voice. "Mrs. Gable, take a breath. What is going on?" "Judge, we have a situation here," she stammered. "There is a group of people gathering on the front steps of the courthouse, about 20 of them. They are holding signs. They are chanting your name." I closed my eyes, rubbing my temples. Let me guess. They are shouting about family rights and elder abuse. "Yes," Mrs. Gable said, surprised. "How did you know?" "Judge, they are making a scene. They are blocking the entrance. Security wants to know if we should disperse them. We can have them removed for disturbing the peace. We can shut this down right now." I walked over to the window and looked out at the street. I thought about Darnell's threats. I thought about LaToya fake tears. I thought about the spit on my grocery cart. If I dispersed them, they would claim I was silencing them. They would claim I was abusing my power to hide the truth. They wanted a confrontation. They wanted footage of police dragging them away so they could play the martyrs. "No, Mrs. Gable," I said, my voice icy. "Do not disperse them." There was a pause on the other end. "Excuse me, Judge." "Let them stand there," I said. "Let them chant. Let them hold their signs. But, Mrs. Gable, I want you to do one thing for me." "Anything, Judge." "Check the perimeter cameras. Make sure every single angle is recording. Make sure the audio is crisp. I want clear shots of their faces. I want clear shots of the slogans on their signs. And Mrs. Gable, send a bailiff out there to politely ask for their permit to protest. When they fail to produce one, because I know they did not file for one, simply inform them that they are in violation of city ordinance, but allow them to stay." "I do not understand," Mrs. Gable admitted. Why are we letting them stay if they are violating ordinance? Because, Mrs. Gable, I said, watching a cardinal land on the bird feeder Otis had built. I am building a case, and I want them to feel comfortable. I want them to think they are winning. The more comfortable they feel, the more mistakes they will make. I hung up the phone. I walked into my home office and looked at the whiteboard where I had started mapping out their attacks. Viral video, check. Public harassment, check. Interference with my workplace, check. They were ticking every single box for a catastrophic defamation and harassment lawsuit. They were handing me the keys to their own destruction, and they were too arrogant to see it. I sat down at my desk and pulled out a fresh legal pad. I wrote the date at the top. Then I wrote a list of names. Darnell Jenkins, Latoya Jenkins, Ebony Jenkins, Kyle Anderson. And then I added a new name, one I had found in the court records linked to Darnell's recent filings. Attorney Marcus Giamatti. I knew him. He was a bottom feeder, a lawyer who chased ambulances and coerced settlements. If he was representing them, it meant they were not just looking for social media clout. They were looking for a legal payout. They were coming for my license. They were coming for my robe. I smiled, but it never reached my eyes. Come on, then, I whispered to the empty room. Come and get it. But do not be surprised when the gavel comes down on your fingers. I opened my laptop again. It was time to prepare the counteroffensive. They were fighting a street brawl. I was preparing for surgical warfare. I checked the time. The courthouse closed in 4 hours. Tomorrow morning I would be deposed. Tomorrow morning I would sit in a room with them and let them think they had cornered me. I picked up the picture of Otis that sat on my desk. He looked so proud in his uniform. Hold on, Pop, I said, touching the glass. Just hold on. We are about to clean house. The late afternoon sun cast long shadows across the living room floor of the house on Martin Luther King Boulevard. I was kneeling on the carpet, carefully wrapping Otis's collection of ceramic figurines in bubble wrap. It was quiet, the kind of silence that usually brought me peace, but today it felt heavy. Every object I touched held a memory. The porcelain shepherd boy he bought at a yard sale for 50 cents because it reminded him of his childhood. The chipped coffee mug that said "World's Okayest Golfer," even though he had never played a day in his life. I was trying to pack away a life that had meant everything to me, while the world outside tried to tear it apart. Then I heard it. The sound was unmistakable. The shattering of glass followed by the heavy thud of boots hitting the hardwood floor in the kitchen. I froze. My first instinct was to call out, thinking maybe it was a neighbor checking in. But then I heard the voices. Careful, you idiot. Do not cut yourself. It was Kyle. Shut up and get inside. The neighbors are watching. That was Darnell. My heart slammed against my ribs. They were here. They had broken into my home. I moved silently, backing into the hallway. I peered around the corner into the kitchen. The back window over the sink was smashed in. Shards of glass glittered in the sink and on the floor. Darnell and Kyle were climbing through, knocking over the drying rack. They looked like wild animals. Their eyes were darting around the room, scanning for anything of value. Darnell went straight for the cookie jar on the counter, grabbing it and smashing it on the floor. Ceramic pieces exploded everywhere. "Where is it?" he hissed, kicking through the debris. The old man must have kept cash somewhere. People like him do not trust banks. Otis trusted banks, I thought furiously. He trusted banks more than he trusted you. Kyle was tearing through the cabinets, throwing plates and bowls over his shoulder. They shattered against the walls. It was not just a search. It was a desecration. They were destroying Otis's home because they could not control Otis's daughter. "Check the bedroom," Kyle shouted. "Check under the mattress. Old people always hide gold under the mattress." They were delusional. They had convinced themselves that a man who worked as a janitor and invested in stocks somehow also had a secret stash of gold bars lying around. It was the logic of greedy, desperate men. I watched Darnell march into the living room. He saw the boxes I had packed. With a roar of frustration, he kicked a box of books, sending paperbacks flying across the room. He grabbed the urn on the mantel. My breath caught in my throat. It was empty. We had scattered Otis's ashes at the lake, but the urn was sacred. Darnell shook it upside down, then threw it against the brick fireplace. It cracked down the middle. I felt a cold rage settle over me. It replaced the fear. It replaced the grief. They had crossed a line that could never be uncrossed. I quietly stepped into the hall closet and reached behind the winter coats. My hand closed around the cool, smooth wood of Otis's old Louisville Slugger baseball bat. He kept it for protection, though he never used it. Today I would. I stepped out of the shadows just as Kyle came running out of the bedroom holding a jewelry box. It contained nothing but costume jewelry and cufflinks, but he looked like he had struck oil. "Put it down," I said. My voice was low, but it cut through the noise of their destruction. Both men spun around. Kyle dropped the box. Darnell's eyes went wide for a second before they narrowed into that familiar, hateful glare. "Well, well, well," Darnell sneered, stepping over a broken picture frame. "Look who is home. We thought you were still at work, doing whatever low-wage job you do." "Get out of my house," I said, tightening my grip on the bat. "Your house?" Darnell laughed, spreading his arms wide. "This is my brother's house. Otis and I were like brothers. That makes this family property. And since I am the patriarch of this family, this house is mine. You are just squatting here." "You are not brothers," I said, stepping forward. "You barely spoke to him for 30 years. You called him a fool for working a mop. Get out before I make you get out." Kyle snorted, reaching into his pocket. "You are gonna make us, huh? With a stick." He pulled out a switchblade. The click of the blade locking into place was loud in the sudden silence. It was a small knife, cheap and rusty, but it was a weapon. The dynamic in the room shifted instantly. This was no longer just a break-in. This was armed robbery. This was assault. "Now listen here, bitch," Kyle said, waving the knife in the air. "We know there is a safe. We know you are hiding the cash. You tell us where it is, and maybe we do not have to cut that pretty face of yours." I looked at the knife. Then I looked at Kyle. He was sweating, shaking slightly. He was a coward trying to play a gangster. I slowly lowered the bat just an inch, not surrendering, but calculating. I shifted my weight to my back foot. My left hand moved casually to my wrist. I pressed the side button on my smartwatch. One long press, two short presses. It was a silent alarm directly connected to the Sheriff Department priority dispatch. As a judge, I had certain security protocols. They did not know that within 3 minutes, this street would be swarming with deputies. "You are making a mistake, Kyle," I said, keeping my eyes on the blade. "Put the knife away. This goes from burglary to armed robbery in 1 second. That is a 20-year sentence in Georgia." Darnell laughed, stepping up beside Kyle. Listen to her quoting the law like she knows something. "We are not going to jail, Jasmine, because nobody is going to know we were here. We are just going to take what is ours. Now drop the bat before Kyle here loses his temper. I did not drop the bat. I raised it, ready to swing. I was not going to let them touch me. I was not going to let them take one more thing from Otis. I heard the distant wail of sirens. Darnell heard it too. His head snapped toward the window. "You called the cops?" he shouted. "I did not have to," I said. "They already know." The color drained from Kyle's face. He looked at the knife in his hand, then at the door. "We gotta go, Darnell," he stammered. "No," Darnell roared, grabbing Kyle's arm. "We are not running. We stay right here. Watch this." He grabbed the knife from Kyle's hand, folded it, and shoved it into his own pocket. Then he did something that made my stomach turn. He ripped his own shirt collar. He ruffled his hair to look disheveled. He rubbed his eyes until they were red. "Help!" he screamed at the top of his lungs. "Help! She is crazy!" The front door burst open. Blue lights flashed against the living room walls, reflecting off the broken glass and the shattered ceramics. 2 uniformed officers rushed in, hands hovering over their holsters. They were young rookies. I recognized one of them from the courthouse cafeteria, but he clearly did not recognize me, in my jeans and t-shirt, holding a baseball bat. "Drop the weapon," one officer shouted, pointing at me. "Ma'am, drop the bat, now." I slowly lowered the bat to the floor and raised my hands. I knew the drill. I needed to de-escalate. "Officers," I said calmly. "These men broke into my home. Officer, please help us," Darnell wailed, dropping to his knees amidst the wreckage he had created. He pointed a shaking finger at me. "My daughter," she snapped. "We came to check on her because she has been depressed, and she attacked us. She started smashing everything. She came at us with that bat. Look at my shirt. She tried to kill me." The officers looked around the room. They saw the broken furniture, the smashed glass, and a woman standing over 2 cowering men with a weapon. It looked exactly like a domestic disturbance. It looked like Darnell was telling the truth. "Ma'am, turn around and place your hands behind your back," the officer said, stepping forward with handcuffs. I did not move. "Officer, I am the homeowner," I said, my voice steady. "These men entered through the back window. The man on the right has a switchblade in his right jacket pocket." "She is lying," Kyle shouted. "She is off her meds. Just take her away." The officer grabbed my wrist. "Ma'am, do not make me ask you twice." I looked the officer in the eye. "Officer Miller," I said, reading his name tag, "before you put those cuffs on me, I suggest you look at the blinking red light on the bookshelf behind you, and the one in the hallway, and the one in the kitchen." Officer Miller froze. He looked up. Sure enough, a small black camera was perched on the top shelf, its red LED staring unblinkingly at the scene. "I had the security system installed last week," I said. "It records audio and video to the cloud. It captured the break-in. It captured the threats. And it definitely captured Darnell ripping his own shirt 5 seconds before you walked in." The room went silent. Darnell stopped crying. He looked at the camera, then back at me with pure hatred. Officer Miller let go of my wrist. He looked at his partner, then at Darnell. "Is this true?" the officer asked, his hand moving away from his cuffs and resting on his radio. "It is. My house," Darnell stammered, standing up quickly. "I have a right to be here. It is a family dispute." Officer Miller face hardened. "Sir, I see a broken window in the kitchen. Did you enter through there?" I lost my key, Darnell lied. Officer checked his pocket for the knife, I said. The partner patted Darnell down and pulled out the switchblade. The rookies exchanged a look. They realized they had almost arrested the victim. Okay, let us take it outside, Officer Miller said, his tone shifting. Gentlemen, you are leaving. Now. Wait, I said. I want to press charges. Breaking and entering, assault with a deadly weapon, vandalism. Officer Miller looked uncomfortable. Ma, and we can write a report, but without reviewing the footage right now, and given that he is claiming residency and you are family, it is a civil matter until the detectives see the tape. We are going to issue a criminal trespass warning. If they come back, we arrest them. But for now, we are removing them from the premises. I knew this game. The rookies were afraid of a false arrest lawsuit involving a family dispute. They wanted to kick the can down the road. But that was fine. A criminal trespass warning was a paper trail, and the footage was safe in the cloud. Fine, I said. Get them out of here. The officers grabbed Darnell and Kyle by the arms and marched them toward the door. This is not over, Jasmine, Darnell shouted over his shoulder as he was shoved onto the porch. You think you are smart. Wait until my lawyer gets involved. You will be sleeping in a cell by next week. I stood in the doorway watching them get shoved into the back of a patrol car to be driven off the property. My house was a wreck. Otis's urn was broken, but I was still standing. I looked at the shattered remains of the urn. I bent down and picked up a piece of the ceramic. You are right, Darnell, I whispered. It is not over. You just gave me the evidence to put you away for 10 years. I went to my laptop and pulled up the security feed. I saved the clip. Then I opened a new file and named it Exhibit B. They had invaded my sanctuary. Now I was going to invade their world. I picked up my phone and dialed the number for the courthouse maintenance crew. I needed the window fixed tonight, because tomorrow morning I had a deposition to attend, and I needed to be well rested for the performance of a lifetime. The heavy oak door of my chambers was closed, shutting out the hum of the busy courthouse hallway. Inside, the air was cool and smelled of old paper and furniture polish. This was my fortress. From my window on the 12th floor, I could see the sprawling skyline of Atlanta, the city where I had been born, abandoned, and then reborn. I sat in my high-backed leather chair, the same chair where I had signed warrants for dangerous criminals and made decisions that altered the courses of lives. But today, I was just trying to breathe. My hand touched the fresh bandage on my wrist where Darnell had grabbed me. The physical bruise was fading, but the anger was just beginning to bloom. There was a soft knock at the door. Enter, I said, my voice automatically shifting into the authoritative tone I used on the bench. The door opened and Bailiff Thomas stepped in. He was a good man who had worked the Superior Court floor for 20 years. He held a thick manila envelope in his hands, looking uncomfortable. He shifted his weight from one foot to the other, his eyes fixed on the carpet rather than my face. Your Honor, I am sorry to disturb you, Thomas said quietly, but a process server just dropped this off at the security desk. It is addressed to you personally, not as a judge, but as a private citizen. Since it came through the legal channel, I had to bring it up. I knew what it was before he even handed it to me. I could feel the malice radiating off the paper. Thank you, Thomas, I said, taking the envelope. You can go. He hesitated for a second, looking at me with concern. Is everything all right, Judge Sterling? You have had a lot of personal calls lately. Everything is under control, Thomas, I said, giving him a tight smile. Just a minor family dispute. As soon as the door clicked shut, I ripped the envelope open. I pulled out the stack of legal documents. My eyes scanned the cover page and a cold laugh escaped my lips. It was a lawsuit filed in the probate court of Fulton County. Plaintiffs Darnell and Latoya Jenkins, defendant Jasmine Sterling. I flipped to the second page to read the cause of action. My hand stopped moving. The words swam before my eyes, bold and black and utterly delusional. Petition for conservatorship due to mental incapacity and undue influence. They were not just suing me for the money. They were trying to declare me incompetent. The document claimed that I had a history of severe mental instability, that I had manipulated a senile dying man named Otis Sterling into changing his will, and that I was currently a danger to myself and others. They were using the term conservatorship, the same legal shackles used to control celebrities and dementia patients, to try and strip me of my autonomy. They wanted to take away my right to spend my own money, my right to make my own decisions, and hand it all over to the loving care of the parents who had left me at a food court. I read the affidavit signed by Latoya. Jasmine has always been a troubled child, prone to violent outbursts and hallucinations. She cannot be trusted with finances. We are doing this for her own safety. It was a masterpiece of fiction. If I were anyone else, if I were just a regular woman working a regular job, this might have terrified me. A judge reading this without context might freeze my assets pending a hearing. But I was not anyone else. I was a colleague of the very judges they were trying to fool. I slammed the file shut. They wanted to question my sanity. I was about to make them question their reality. Across town, in a strip mall office sandwiched between a pawn shop and a liquor store, Marcus Giamatti leaned back in his squeaky chair. The leather was cracked and the office smelled of stale takeout and cheap cologne. He propped his feet up on a desk cluttered with files, putting his hands behind his head. He looked like a man who thought he had just won the lottery. Sitting across from him were Darnell, Latoya Kyle, and Ebony. They looked cramped in the small office, but their faces were glowing with anticipation. "You folks have a slam-dunk case," Giamatti said, flashing a yellow-toothed smile. "I have seen this 100 times. The ungrateful child manipulates the dying relative. Judges hate that. And with the mother crying on the stand about wanting to protect her sick daughter, we are going to crush her." Latoya dabbed at her dry eyes with a tissue, playing the part even when there was no audience. "I just want what is best for Jasmine," she sniffed. "She is clearly unwell. Did you see how she attacked us with that baseball bat?" "Exactly," Giamatti said, pointing a finger at her. "That police report for the domestic disturbance is gold. Even though they did not arrest her, the fact that police were called supports our narrative of instability. We will paint her as paranoid, aggressive, and unfit." Kyle leaned forward, greedy eyes wide. "So how fast can we get the money? I have a deposit to make on a boat." Giamatti chuckled. "Easy, Tiger. First, we get the temporary freeze on her assets. That happens this week. Then we force a settlement. Once she realizes her bank accounts are locked and she cannot buy groceries, she will come crawling back. We offer to drop the conservatorship if she gives us 70% of the estate. I take my 40% cut, and you folks walk away millionaires." Ebony was busy texting, probably updating her followers on the latest family drama. "What if she fights back?" Ebony asked without looking up. "She acted really tough at the funeral." Giamatti waved his hand dismissively. "She is a nobody, probably a secretary or a clerk based on where the process server found her. She cannot afford a real lawyer. She will probably get some public defender or try to represent herself. And trust me, she does not want her dirty laundry aired. He reached for the phone on his desk. "Watch this," he said, winking at Darnell. "I am going to put the fear of God into her right now." He dialed the number listed on the court documents. He thought it was my home landline. He had no idea he was dialing the direct secure line to the chambers of a superior court judge. The phone on my desk rang, a sharp, authoritative trill that cut through the silence of my office. I looked at the caller ID. Law Office of Marcus Giamatti. I let it ring twice before picking up. I did not say hello. I just listened. Ms. Sterling Giamatti voice oozed through the receiver, sickly sweet and condescending. "This is Marcus Giamatti representing your parents. I assume you have received our little care package?" I said nothing. I hit the record button on my desk console. "Listen, sweetheart." Giamatti continued, taking my silence for fear. "I am going to make this easy for you. You can save yourself a lot of embarrassment. If we go to court, I am going to subpoena your medical records, every therapy session, every prescription, every time you cried to a doctor about your mommy issues. It will all be public record. Your boss will see it. Your neighbors will see it. Do you really want the world to know how crazy you are?" I felt a vein throb in my temple. He was threatening to weaponize mental health stigmas against me. It was low, even for a bottom feeder like him. "Or," he said, dropping his voice to a whisper, "you can sign the settlement agreement I am sending over. You give the family $2 million. You keep the house and a little nest egg, and we all go home happy. What do you say, Jasmine? Be a good girl for once." I took a slow, deep breath. I looked at the law degree hanging on my wall. I looked at the picture of Otis. "I will see you at the deposition, Mr. Giamatti," I said. My voice was calm, cold, and devoid of any emotion. I hung up the phone before he could say another word. I did not call a lawyer. I did not look for a firm to represent me. I was the best legal mind I knew, and nobody knew the facts of this case better than I did. I pushed aside the piles of current cases I was presiding over. I pulled a fresh legal pad toward me. I started writing. Counterclaim. Defendant Jasmine Sterling versus plaintiffs Darnell Jenkins et al. My pen moved furiously across the page. I was not just defending myself. I was building a trap. I listed the counts. Defamation of character, filing a false police report, abuse of process, intentional infliction of emotional distress. But I needed more. I needed the nails for the coffin. I picked up my cell phone and dialed a number I had not used in years. It rang once. "Wallace Investigations." "I need a rush job," I said. The voice on the other end was gruff. "We are booked solid for 2 weeks. It is Judge Sterling." There was a pause, and then the sound of a chair scraping as the man sat up straighter. "I am listening, Your Honor." "I need a full financial autopsy on 3 individuals," I said, reading the names off my notepad. "Darnell Jenkins, LaToya Jenkins, Kyle Anderson. I do not just want credit scores. I want the deep dirt. I want the offshore gambling accounts. I want the unreported cash income. I want to know about the construction fraud investigation in Marietta involving Mr. Anderson. And I want the tax returns Darnell has been hiding from the IRS since 2015. "I can have the preliminary report by Friday," Wallace said. "I need it by tomorrow morning," I said. "I have a deposition at 9. There was a long silence. That is going to cost you double. I will pay triple, I said. But I want it in a sealed binder on my desk by 8 a.m. sharp. And Wallace? I want the photos of LaToya dancing at her niece's wedding last week. The ones that prove her disability claim is fraud. Consider it done, Judge. I hung up the phone. The sun was setting outside, turning the Atlanta skyline a bruising purple. I looked down at the documents I had drafted. I had laid out every lie, every manipulation, every crime they had committed in their pursuit of Otis's money. I opened my desk drawer and pulled out a heavy rubber stamp. It was the stamp I used for sealed juvenile records or high-profile cases that required absolute discretion. I closed the file folder containing my counterclaim. I positioned the stamp over the cover. Thud. The red ink shouted the word confidential across the front. They wanted to question my capacity. They wanted to take my voice. Tomorrow morning, in a quiet conference room, they were going to find out that they had not trapped a victim. They had trapped themselves in a room with the law itself, and ignorance of the law would be no excuse. The next morning, the lobby of the Fulton County Courthouse was buzzing with the frantic energy of a hive. Lawyers in ill-fitting suits rushed past, clutching briefcases while anxious defendants paced the marble floors, checking their watches. I walked through the main revolving doors, holding a cardboard cup of black coffee. I usually took the judge's private elevator in the back, but today I needed to clear my head. I was wearing a simple beige trench coat over a white blouse and slacks, blending in perfectly with the sea of clerks and paralegals. I wanted to feel the pulse of the building before I went upstairs to lock myself in my chambers. I wanted to remember why I fought for justice in the first place. But peace was a luxury I could not afford. Through the glass doors I saw them. The Jenkins family had arrived. They did not walk in quietly. They marched in. Darnell was in the lead, wearing the same shiny suit from the funeral, looking around as if he owned the building. LaToya was right behind him, wearing an oversized hat that was completely inappropriate for a government building. But it was Kyle who made my stomach turn. He was wearing a fresh t-shirt with bold white letters that read, "Black Lives Matter." I almost choked on my coffee. This was the man who used racial slurs at the dinner table. This was the man who called my neighborhood a ghetto. Yet here he was, co-opting a movement for racial justice to garner sympathy for his fraudulent cause. It was a level of performative hypocrisy that made my blood boil. They were heading toward the clerk office, presumably to file more motions, or perhaps just to harass the staff. They were laughing loud, boisterous laughs that echoed off the high ceilings, showing absolutely no respect for the solemnity of the place. I lowered my head, pulling my coat tighter around me, hoping to slip past them toward the security checkpoint. I just needed to get to the elevators. Once I was past the metal detectors, I was in my territory. But luck was not on my side. LaToya stopped abruptly near the information desk. Her eyes scanned the crowd like a predator looking for a weak gazelle. And then, her gaze locked onto me. "There she is!" she shrieked, pointing a manicured finger directly at my face. The sound cut through the hum of the lobby like a siren. Everyone stopped. Security guards looked up. Lawyers paused mid-sentence. "Catch her!" LaToya screamed again, hysteria rising in her voice. "That is the thief! That is the one who stole our money!" Darnell spun around, his eyes widening when he saw me. A cruel grin spread across his face. He nudged Kyle, who immediately puffed out his chest, trying to look intimidating in his ironic t-shirt. "Well, look who decided to show up to work," Darnell boomed his voice, carrying across the cavernous room. "I thought you would be hiding under your bed, Jasmine." I kept walking, moving toward the metal detectors. I did not engage. I did not look at them. "Leave me alone, Darnell," I said, keeping my voice low. "You are making a scene." "You are damn right I am making a scene," he shouted, following me. He was getting closer, closing the distance with heavy, aggressive strides. The crowd began to part, forming a circle around us. People pulled out their phones, sensing drama. "You think you can ban us from your house?" Darnell shouted, playing to the audience. "You think you can call the cops on your own father? I am here to get justice. I am here to show everyone what an ungrateful child looks like." He was right behind me now. I could feel his heat. I could smell the stale tobacco. I turned around to face him, my back against the security scanner. "Back off," I warned. "Or what?" Darnell sneered. "You going to hit me with your bat again?" He looked around at the crowd, waving his arms. "This woman beat me," he lied, pointing at me. "She attacked her elderly parents because we asked for help with medical bills. She is dangerous." A murmur went through the crowd. I saw doubt in the eyes of strangers. They saw a large man claiming victimhood and a woman standing alone. The narrative was shifting just as he wanted. Latoya rushed up beside him, tears already flowing. "Please, Jasmine, just sign the papers. Stop hurting us." It was a trap. A public humiliation designed to break me before the deposition. But they had forgotten where we were. They thought this was just a building. They did not know it was my church, my home, and my battlefield. The lobby fell into a hush as the tension peaked. Darnell seemed to feed off the attention. He felt powerful. He felt untouchable. He reached out and grabbed a handful of my hair, yanking my head back. "Listen to your mother," he hissed. Instinct took over. I did not freeze. I did not cower. I grabbed his wrist and twisted, breaking his grip with a self-defense move I had learned in the academy. I shoved him back, creating space. "Do not touch me!" I shouted, my voice ringing with authority. Darnell stumbled back, his ego bruised more than his wrist. He heard the giggles from a few teenagers in the crowd. He saw Kyle looking at him with doubt. He was losing control of the narrative. He needed to reassert dominance. He needed to show everyone who was boss. His face turned a dark, violent shade of crimson. He stepped forward, putting his entire weight into the motion. He did not grab me this time. He swung. His open palm connected with the side of my face with the force of a sledgehammer. Crack! The sound was sickeningly loud. It sounded like a pistol shot echoing off the marble walls. My head whipped to the side. The cardboard cup of coffee flew from my hand, splashing dark liquid across the pristine floor. A sharp, metallic taste filled my mouth. I stumbled, gripping the metal detector for balance. The world spun for a second. My ear rang with a high-pitched whine that drowned out the gasps of the crowd. I touched my lip. My fingers came away red. Blood. He had split my lip. He had struck me. In public. In broad daylight. Silence descended on the lobby. It was absolute, terrified silence. Even Latoya stopped her fake crying. Kyle looked pale, his mouth hanging open. They realized Darnell had gone too far. But Darnell did not see it. He was breathing heavy, standing over me with his chest heaving. "That will teach you respect," he spat. I slowly straightened up. I wiped the blood from my lip with the back of my hand. The pain was throbbing, radiating through my jaw. but my mind was crystal clear. It was sharper than it had ever been. I looked up, not at Darnell, not at the crowd. I looked straight up at the ceiling directly above the security checkpoint. A small black dome camera was mounted there. The red LED light was blinking steadily, recording. It had seen the approach. It had seen the grab. It had seen the slap. It had seen the unprovoked assault on a woman who had her hands down. I lowered my gaze to Darnell. He was smiling a smug, satisfied smile. He thought he had won. He thought he had put the unruly child back in her place. He had no idea that he had just signed his own arrest warrant. I saw movement out of the corner of my eye. 3 uniformed deputies were sprinting toward us from the inner checkpoint. Their hands were on their tasers. Their faces were grim. They knew who I was. They had seen Judge Sterling get assaulted, and they were ready to take Darnell down with extreme prejudice. One of the deputies, Sheriff Johnson, a man I had coffee with every Tuesday, was reaching for his baton, his eyes locked on Darnell. I raised my hand, palm open, fingers spread. Stop. The single word stopped them in their tracks. It was not a plea. It was a command. Sheriff Johnson hesitated, looking from me to Darnell. But Judge, he began, his voice filled with outrage. I shook my head slightly, giving him a look that said, "Trust me." If they arrested him now, it would be a scene. Darnell would play the victim of police brutality. He would scream about injustice. He would bond out by the afternoon and claim the system was rigged. I did not want him arrested for a misdemeanor assault. I wanted him destroyed. I took a step toward Sheriff Johnson, lowering my voice so only he and the deputies could hear. "Stand down," I whispered, dabbing my lip with a tissue someone had handed me. "Let him walk away." "But, Your Honor," Johnson hissed, his face red with suppressed anger. "He just assaulted a federal—" "I know what he did," I interrupted, my eyes hard as flint. "And I have the footage." "But tomorrow is the deposition. If you arrest him now, he lawyers up and delays everything. Let him think he got away with it. Let him think I am weak. Let him walk into that conference room tomorrow feeling like a king." Johnson looked at my bloody lip, then at Darnell, who was now laughing with Kyle, high-fiving him as if they had just scored a touchdown. "Are you sure?" Judge Johnson asked. "I am sure," I said. "Give him enough rope, Sheriff." Johnson nodded slowly, holstering his taser. He stepped back, signaling his men to hold the line. I turned back to Darnell. I let my shoulders slump slightly. I let the fear show in my eyes, just enough to feed his ego. "Are you finished?" I asked, my voice trembling slightly. Darnell laughed, stepping closer. "Oh, I am just getting started. See you tomorrow, Jasmine. Bring your checkbook. Or maybe bring a helmet." He turned and strutted out of the lobby, LaToya and Kyle trailing behind him like hyenas following a lion. They walked past the security guards who were glaring holes into their backs. I watched them go. I watched the confident bounce in Darnell's step. He thought he had slapped a helpless daughter. He did not know that in the state of Georgia, assaulting a judicial officer in the performance of their duties, or in retaliation for their duties, carried a mandatory minimum sentence. He had just turned a simple civil dispute into a federal felony. Sheriff Johnson handed me a fresh napkin. "You are a cold player, Judge," he said with admiration. I wiped the last of the blood from my chin. I looked at the red stain on the white paper. "It is not a game, Sheriff," I said, watching the revolving doors spin. "It is a sentencing hearing, and the defendant just pleaded guilty. I smoothed my coat, turned, and walked through the metal detector. The machine beeped once, acknowledging my presence. I walked toward the elevators, leaving the whispers of the crowd behind. My face hurt, but my soul felt light. The trap was set. The bait was taken. Tomorrow morning, the steel jaws would snap shut. That night, while I sat in the silence of my home applying ice to my swollen lip, the Jenkins family was throwing the party of the century. Thanks to social media, I had a front row seat to their premature victory lap. My cousin Marcus, who had not spoken to Darnell in 5 years, sent me the link to Ebony Livestream. I sat in the dark, the blue light of my laptop illuminating my face, and watched them celebrate my destruction. They were in the backyard of their rented townhouse in Decatur. Smoke from a barbecue grill clouded the air, mixing with the thumping bass of hip-hop music that was far too loud for a Tuesday night. Darnell was holding court by the cooler, wearing a fresh shirt to replace the one he had ripped earlier. He was holding a beer in one hand and a pair of tongs in the other, gesturing wildly to a group of relatives who had suddenly reappeared in their lives the moment they smelled money. These were the same aunts and uncles who used to cross the street to avoid Darnell asking for a loan. Now they were laughing at his jokes and holding out their plates for ribs. Ebony was the star of the show. She was walking around with her ring light, holding her phone high, broadcasting to her thousands of new followers. "We got her, guys!" Ebony shouted into the camera, her voice slurring slightly from the cheap wine she was drinking. "Justice has been served. My sister tried to assault my dad today in the courthouse. Can you believe that? She slapped him right in the lobby. But do not worry. Tomorrow she signs the papers. Tomorrow we take back what belongs to this family." I watched as the comments rolled in. Hearts, fire emojis, people cheering for them, not knowing they were cheering for a crime. Then the camera panned to Kyle. He was clearly drunk, swaying slightly as he leaned against the patio railing. He saw the camera and stumbled forward, grabbing Ebony's shoulder. "Tell them about the boat, babe!" Kyle shouted, spilling beer on the deck. "Tell them about the lifestyle change!" "Listen up, everyone. Once that check clears tomorrow, Uncle Kyle is taking everyone shopping. You get a Gucci bag. You get a Gucci bag. We are going to Phipps Plaza, and we are shutting it down." The relatives cheered. LaToya danced into the frame, wearing a feather boa that looked ridiculous in the humid Atlanta heat. She shimmied her shoulders, looking directly into the lens. "The Lord provides," she screamed. "The devil tried to test us, but the Jenkins blood is strong. We are survivors." I closed the laptop slowly. Survivors. That is what they called themselves. They were not survivors. They were vultures, picking at a carcass before the animal was even dead. They were spending money they did not have, making promises they could not keep, and rewriting history to suit their narrative. They truly believed they had won. They thought my silence at the courthouse was submission. They thought my refusal to have Darnell arrested was fear. They had no idea that I was simply letting them dig their own graves. I stood up and walked to my dining room table. It was no longer a place for eating. It was a war room. 3 thick binders lay arranged in a perfect row. They were the result of the rush job by Wallace Investigations, and they were worth every penny of the triple fee I had paid. I ran my hand over the leather covers, feeling the weight of the truth contained inside. I opened the first binder labeled IRS. It contained 10 years of Darnell financial history. It showed a man who claimed 0 income on his tax returns while depositing thousands of dollars in cash into hidden accounts. It showed gambling winnings he never reported and consulting fees from shady businesses that did not seem to exist. In the eyes of the federal government, Darnell was a ghost. But in this binder, he was a felon. I opened the second binder labeled Insurance Fraud. This was LaToya Coffin. It contained surveillance photos taken by a private investigator over the last 6 months. There was LaToya carrying heavy grocery bags. There was LaToya bowling. There was LaToya dancing on a table at a wedding reception, doing the electric slide in high heels. All of this while she was collecting monthly disability checks for a back injury so severe she claimed she could not walk without assistance. The video file on the flash drive taped to the inside cover was the smoking gun that would send her to federal prison for wire fraud. Then there was the third binder, the one for Kyle. I flipped through the pages. Embezzlement. It was a classic scheme. He had been skimming off the top of a construction supply company he managed in Marietta, ordering materials that never arrived and pocketing the difference. There was a warrant for his arrest sitting in a drawer in Cobb County that had not been executed because he kept moving addresses. Well, he was not moving anymore. I knew exactly where he would be tomorrow at 9 in the morning. I walked to the bathroom mirror and turned on the harsh vanity lights. I looked at my reflection. The left side of my lip was purple and swollen. There was a small cut where my tooth had broken the skin. It throbbed with a dull, persistent ache. I reached for my makeup bag. I did not try to hide the bruise with concealer. I did not want to mask the violence. Instead, I picked up my favorite tube of lipstick. It was a deep, blood-red shade called Victory. I applied it carefully, wincing slightly as the applicator touched the wound. The red color blended with the bruise, turning my mouth into a crimson slash. It looked dangerous. It looked like a warning. I am not hiding this, I whispered to my reflection. I am wearing it. I went back to the living room and picked up the picture of Otis that sat on the mantel. He looked so peaceful in the photo, unaware of the storm that was raging over his legacy. You can rest now, Pop, I said softly. Tomorrow you get to rest. I promised you I would make something of myself. I promised you I would stand up for the truth. Tomorrow, I keep that promise. I turned off the lights, leaving the binder sitting in the moonlight. I did not sleep well that night. I laid in bed listening to the wind rattle the windows, thinking about the 5-year-old girl at the mall. I thought about how scared she was, how small she felt. Tomorrow, that little girl was going to put giants in chains. The sun rose over Atlanta with a humid haze promising a scorching day. It was 8:30 in the morning when the Jenkins family pulled up to the high-rise building in Buckhead where the deposition was scheduled. They did not come in one car. They came in a convoy of 2 Ubers they could barely afford, trying to look like a motorcade. I was already inside, watching from the second-floor mezzanine. I had arrived an hour early, entering through the secure judge's entrance in the parking garage. I was sitting in a private office, drinking tea, watching the security monitors. They stepped out of the cars and I almost laughed. They looked like they were going to a costume party dressed as millionaires. Darnell was wearing a white suit before Labor Day. It was ill-fitting, straining at the buttons, and he had paired it with a bright purple dress shirt and matching alligator shoes that were almost certainly fake. He adjusted his tie, looking up at the glass skyscraper with a look of pure greed. LaToya was wearing a fur stole, in 80-degree weather. She had draped it over a sequined cocktail dress that belonged in a nightclub, not a law office. She was fanning herself furiously, sweat already beading on her forehead, but she refused to take off the fur. It was her symbol of status. Ebony was dressed in what she thought a lawyer would look like based on TV shows. A tight pencil skirt and a blazer with nothing underneath. She was already filming, holding her phone up to capture their grand entrance. Kyle brought up the rear, wearing a suit that was clearly bought at a thrift store, with sleeves that covered his knuckles. He was carrying a briefcase. I knew for a fact that the briefcase was empty. He just wanted to look like he had business to do. They pushed through the revolving doors into the cool, air-conditioned lobby. They walked to the reception desk with an air of arrogance that made the security guards stiffen. "We're here for the Sterling deposition," Darnell announced loud enough for the entire lobby to hear. "We are the plaintiffs, the winners." The receptionist, a young woman with impeccable patience, looked up over her glasses. "Name, please?" she asked politely. "Darnell Jenkins," Darnell said, leaning over the desk. "And you might want to remember that name. I am about to own half this town." The receptionist typed his name into the system. Her face remained blank. 11th floor, conference room B. Mr. Giamatti is already there waiting for you." They did not say thank you. They turned and headed for the elevators, laughing and high-fiving. "This is it, baby!" LaToya squealed, her voice echoing in the marble hall. "The elevator to the penthouse. We're going up." Kyle punched the button for the 11th floor. "Just think, Darnell," he said as the doors slid shut. "By noon, we will be popping bottles on a yacht. That little girl is probably crying in the bathroom right now, terrified of facing us." I watched on the monitor as the elevator numbers ticked up. 1, 2, 3. They were laughing. They were fixing their hair. Darnell was practicing his stern father face in the mirrored walls of the elevator. They had no idea that they were not stepping into a negotiation. They were stepping into a slaughterhouse. They did not know that the building did not belong to a private law firm. This was an annex of the Superior Court, used for high-profile arbitration. They did not know that the room next to Conference Room B was filled with 2 FBI agents, a forensic accountant from the IRS, and 3 deputies from the Fulton County Sheriff Department. And they certainly did not know that the woman waiting for them was not Jasmine, the victim. I stood up, smoothing my black judicial robes which hung on the back of the door. I decided not to wear them. I wanted them to see me, just me. I picked up the 3 binders. I picked up my cup of tea. I walked to the elevator and pressed the button for the 11th floor. It was time to go to work. The elevator dinged and the doors opened. I stepped out into the hallway. I could hear their voices coming from the conference room down the hall. They were loud. They were happy. It was the last time they would ever be happy again. The air inside Conference Room B was chilled to a precise 68 degrees, but the tension radiating from the other side of the mahogany table made the room feel stifling. I sat in the high-backed leather chair, my spine pressed against the upholstery perfectly straight. I was wearing a black tailored suit, the fabric absorbing the harsh fluorescent lights overhead. I wore no jewelry, no watch, and no makeup except for the deep crimson lipstick I had applied the night before. It was the color of a warning sign. It was the only splash of color in my otherwise monochromatic existence at that moment. My hands rested on the table, clasped loosely over a stack of 3 thick binders. Across from me, the Jenkins family looked like a carnival troupe that had broken into a bank. Darnell was sprawled in his chair, his legs stretched out so far that his alligator shoes were resting on the polished wood of the conference table. He was leaning back his hands behind his head, looking at the ceiling as if he were already measuring it for a chandelier. He looked comfortable. He looked like a man who owned the building, rather than a man who was moments away from losing his freedom. LaToya sat to his right, holding a compact mirror inches from her face. She was aggressively applying a layer of bright pink lip gloss, smacking her lips together with a wet, sticky sound that echoed in the quiet room. She adjusted her fur stole, fussing with the collar, ensuring it covered the neckline of her sequined dress. She looked ridiculous. A caricature of wealth drawn by someone who had never actually seen it. Kyle was spinning a pen between his fingers, nervously tapping his foot against the table leg. Ebony was the only one not looking at me. She was scrolling through her phone, probably checking the view count on her latest smear campaign video, occasionally letting out a small, self-satisfied giggle. Darnell slowly lowered his gaze from the ceiling and locked eyes with me. He let out a long, dramatic sigh. "So here we are," he said, his voice booming in the acoustic space. "The prodigal daughter returns." He took his feet off the table and leaned forward, his elbows resting on the wood. "Did you bring the checkbook, Jasmine? Or do I need to come over there and teach you another lesson in respect?" He touched his own cheek, mimicking the slap he had delivered yesterday. My face still throbbed where he had hit me, but I did not flinch. I did not blink. I simply stared at him, my expression as unreadable as a marble statue. "Cat got your tongue?" Darnell laughed, looking at Kyle for validation. "That is what I thought. You know, I was expecting a fight. I really was. But looking at you now, sitting there, all quiet in your little funeral suit, I see you finally realized who the boss is. You are smart, girl. You know when you are beaten." He reached into his pocket and pulled out a crumpled pack of cigarettes. "You cannot smoke in here," I said. My voice was soft, barely above a whisper, but it cut through the room like a razor blade. Darnell paused the cigarette halfway to his lips. He grinned. "I can do whatever I want," he said, putting the cigarette in his mouth. "I am the plaintiff. I am the victim. And once you sign those papers, I am the millionaire. So if I want to smoke, I will smoke. If I want to dance on this table, I will dance." He lit the lighter, the flame flickering in the cool air. "You really should have just paid us at the funeral, Jasmine," he said, exhaling a cloud of gray smoke toward me. "We could have avoided all this ugliness. But you had to be stubborn. You had to play the tough guy. And look where it got you. Sitting alone in a room with the people you tried to throw away." I watched the smoke dissipate. I watched the ash form on the tip of his cigarette. I said nothing. I just waited. He was right about one thing. We could have avoided this. But he was the one who had chosen the path of war. I was just the one who was going to finish it. The clock on the wall ticked past 9:15. Mr. Giamatti was late. It was a power move, a classic tactic used by insecure lawyers to destabilize the opposition. Make them wait. Make them sweat. Make them feel like their time is less valuable than yours. Darnell and Latoya did not seem to mind. They were enjoying the free bottled water and the plush chairs. But out in the hallway, I could hear footsteps, heavy, confident strides pacing back and forth. Then a voice booming through the heavy oak door. It was muffled but distinct. "Yeah, I'm walking in now. No, don't worry about it. It is a slam dunk. The girl is a nobody. She is terrified." I recognized the voice immediately. It was Marcus Giamatti. He was talking to someone on his cell phone. Probably another client he was planning to defraud, or perhaps a creditor he was trying to dodge. "I am going to pluck this chicken until she is naked," Giamatti laughed, his voice carrying through the wood. "We are asking for $2 million, but I will settle for 1.5 if she cries hard enough. Easy money. I will be at the golf course by noon." Inside the room, Kyle chuckled. "You hear that?" he whispered to Ebony. Golf by noon. That means we get paid today. I looked down at the binders in front of me. I opened the cover of the first one. The sound of the stiff leather cover bending was sharp in the silence. Flip. Darnell looked at me, annoyed by the noise. "What are you doing over there?" he asked. "Playing with your scrapbook?" I ignored him. I turned a page. The crisp sound of high-quality paper sliding against paper filled the room. Flip. I was looking at a document labeled Federal Tax Lien 2019. It detailed a sum of $45,000 owed by Darnell Jenkins. Flip. I turned to the next section. A series of bank statements showing transfers to an offshore betting site. Flip. The rhythmic sound began to irritate them. It was too calm, too methodical. It was the sound of a guillotine blade being slowly hoisted up, notch by notch. "Stop that," LaToya snapped, closing her compact mirror. "You are making me nervous." "Just sit still and wait for the lawyer." I turned another page. This one contained a photograph of Kyle loading stolen lumber into his personal truck. The resolution was crystal clear. Flip. Kyle shifted in his seat. He looked at the binders, then at my face. For the first time, a flicker of doubt crossed his eyes. He noticed that my hands were not shaking. He noticed that I was not sweating. He noticed that I was reading the documents with the intensity of a surgeon reviewing an X-ray. "Hey, Kyle," said, his voice losing some of its bravado. "What is in those books, Jasmine?" I did not look up. I turned another page. This time, it was a medical report from a private investigator detailing LaToya's ability to run a 5K charity race last month. Flip. "Nothing that concerns you yet," I said without lifting my eyes. The door handle turned. The heavy brass latch clicked. The sound of Giamatti's laughter ceased abruptly as he ended his call. "Finally," Darnell said, stubbing out his cigarette on the polished wood of the table, leaving a permanent black mark. "Let us get this over with." I closed the binder. I clasped my hands on top of it. I took a deep breath, inhaling the scent of lemon polish and stale smoke. The stage was set. The actors were in place. And the curtain was about to rise on the final act of their tragedy. The heavy door swung open, revealing Marcus Giamatti in all his greasy glory. He was a short man who compensated for his stature with a suit that was too expensive and a cologne that was too strong. He swept into the room, carrying a battered leather briefcase, looking like he owned the entire city of Atlanta. Good morning," Giamatti announced, flashing a smile that showed too many teeth. "My apologies for the delay. Traffic on the connector was a nightmare, but never fear, the cavalry has arrived." He walked over to the Jenkins side of the table, shaking Darnell's hand vigorously. "Mr. Jenkins, looking sharp. Mrs. Jenkins, lovely as always. And the young power couple ready to claim their fortune?" He did not even look at me. To him, I was just a silhouette on the other side of the table, a hurdle to be jumped, a check to be cashed. He placed his briefcase on the table and snapped the latches open. "Now," he said, rubbing his hands together, "let us see if our little defendant is ready to play ball. I assume she is alone? No lawyer? Just as I predicted." He finally turned his head. He looked across the expanse of the mahogany table, prepared to see a cowering, frightened woman. He was prepared to see a victim he could bully into submission. His eyes landed on me. At first, there was no recognition, just a pause. He took in the black suit, the severe hair, the red lipstick. Then his eyes met mine. I stared at him. I did not blink. I let the silence stretch out, letting it wrap around his throat like a noose. I held his gaze with the same intensity I used when I sat on the bench looking down at defendants who had lied to my face. I saw the moment it happened. I saw the spark of memory ignite in his brain. His smile faltered. The corners of his mouth twitched. His eyes widened slightly, pupils dilating in sudden, panicked recognition. He knew me. He had stood before me just last week in courtroom 4B. He had tried to argue a frivolous motion to dismiss in a landlord-tenant case. I had denied it with prejudice and warned him that his conduct was bordering on unethical. I had told him that one more strike would result in a report to the Bar Association. He was looking at that same judge now, but she was sitting at the defendant's table. The color drained from his face so fast it looked like a magic trick. He went from a healthy flush to the color of wet ash in a heartbeat. His mouth opened, but no sound came out. He looked like a fish gasping for air on a dock. His hands, which had been holding the lid of his briefcase, went limp. Thud. The briefcase slipped from his grip and hit the floor with a heavy, final sound. It toppled over, spilling papers across the carpet. Giamatti did not move to pick them up. He was frozen. He was paralyzed by the sheer terror of realization. LaToya frowned, looking from the lawyer to the floor. "Mr. Giamatti," she asked, her voice shrill. "Are you okay? You look like you have seen a ghost." He had. He had seen the ghost of his career. He pointed a shaking finger at me. His other hand grasped the edge of the table for support, as if his legs were about to give out. "You," he wheezed, his voice barely audible. Darnell looked confused. "Yeah, that is her. That is my daughter. Go ahead, give it to her. Tell her she's going to jail." Giamatti did not look at Darnell. He could not take his eyes off me. He looked like a man who had just realized he was standing in the middle of a minefield, and he had just heard the click of a trigger under his foot. "Judge," he whispered. The word hung in the air softly at first, then echoing in the silence. "Judge Sterling." Kyle laughed, a nervous, confused sound. "Judge? What are you talking about, man? She's a secretary." Giamatti whipped his head around, his eyes wild. "Shut up," he hissed at Kyle. "Shut up, you idiot." He turned back to me, and for the first time in his life, Marcus Giamatti looked truly humble. He slowly straightened his tie, his hands trembling uncontrollably. "Good morning, Your Honor," he stammered, his voice cracking. I had no idea. When they said Jasmine Jenkins, I did not make the connection. I leaned forward slightly, resting my chin on my clasped hands. "Good morning, Mr. Giamatti," I said, my voice smooth and deadly. "Please pick up your briefcase. We have a lot to discuss, and I believe you are sitting in my seat." Mr. Giamatti stood there, shaking like a leaf in a hurricane. Beads of sweat instantly appeared on his forehead, pooling in the deep wrinkles of his tan skin. He looked from me to his briefcase on the floor, and then back to me as if praying this was some sort of terrible hallucination caused by bad shellfish. He opened his mouth to speak, but only a strangled squeak came out. He cleared his throat violently, trying to regain some semblance of the arrogant lawyer who had walked in 10 seconds ago. But the air of invincibility was gone. It had been replaced by the raw, primal fear of a man watching his career flush down the toilet. The, he stammered, clutching the back of a chair for support. "Judge Sterling." "Good morning, Your Honor. I did not know. I swear on my mother is grave, I did not know you were the defendant." The silence that followed was heavy enough to crush a car. I did not smile. I did not nod. I simply leaned back in my chair and crossed my arms. "You seem surprised, Mr. Giamatti," I said, my voice cool and even. "You were quite vocal on the phone yesterday about dragging my name through the mud. You called me a nobody. You said you were going to pluck this chicken until she was naked. Well, here I am. The chicken is waiting. Pluck away." Giamatti turned a shade of pale green. "I am so sorry, Your Honor. That was legal posturing. Just talk. If I had known this was a conflict of interest involving a sitting superior court judge, I never would have took the case. I have the utmost respect for your bench." LaToya let out a loud, confused huff. She looked from the terrified lawyer to me, her eyes narrowing in irritation. "What on earth is going on here?" she demanded, snapping her fingers to get Giamatti's attention. "Why are you calling her Your Honor? Why are you bowing to her? She is Jasmine. She answers phones for a living. She washes dishes. She is a mental patient, for God's sake. Stop acting like she is the Queen of England and get back to suing her." Giamatti whipped his head around so fast I thought he might get whiplash. The fear in his eyes was replaced by a sudden, frantic rage directed at his own clients. "Shut up!" he roared, his voice cracking. "Just shut your mouth right now!" Darnell stood up, his face turning red. "Hey, man, do not talk to my wife like that. We are paying you to... You are paying me to dig my own grave," Giamatti screamed, interrupting him. "Do you people have any idea who this is? Do you have any idea who you just dragged me into a room with?" He pointed a shaking finger at me. "This is not a secretary, you morons. This is the Honorable Jasmine Sterling. She is the youngest Superior Court judge in Fulton County. She presides over felony cases. She puts people like you and me in prison for breakfast. Last week, she suspended my partner's license for filing a frivolous motion. And you brought me here to try and blackmail her." The room went dead silent. You could hear the hum of the air conditioner. LaToya looked at me, her mouth opening and closing like a goldfish. Darnell slowly sank back into his chair, his eyes wide, fixed on my face. Ebony lowered her phone, her live stream forgotten. Judge Kyle whispered, "Like a real judge, with a gavel and everything." "Yes, you idiot," Giamatti hissed, wiping sweat from his upper lip. "A real judge. And we just tried to extort her. Do you know what the penalty is for attempting to influence a judicial officer? Do you know what happens when you file a false affidavit against a sitting judge claiming she is insane? We are not just losing this case. We are going to jail. All of us." He turned back to me, clasping his hands together in a pleading gesture. "Your Honor, please. I was misled. My clients told me she was a receptionist. They told me she had a history of psychosis. I filed the paperwork in good faith based on their lies. I will withdraw the petition immediately. I will burn the file. Just please do not report this to the bar." I looked at him with zero sympathy. "Sit down, Mr. Giamatti," I said, pointing to the chair opposite me. "The deposition has begun, and you are not going anywhere until I say so." I stood up. The movement was slow and deliberate. I pushed my chair back, and it scraped against the floor, echoing like a thunderclap. I walked around the table, moving with the grace and authority that I had earned through years of studying law and fighting for my place in a world that wanted to keep me down. I was no longer the abandoned 5-year-old girl at the mall. I was no longer the quiet daughter taking verbal abuse at a funeral. I was the law, and Judgment Day had arrived. I picked up the first heavy binder from the table. It was the blue one, the one with Kyle name on the spine. I walked over to where Kyle was sitting. He shrank back in his chair, looking small and pathetic in his thrift store suit. "You wanted a boat, Kyle," I said, my voice projecting clearly to every corner of the room. "You wanted to start a business. You wanted me to invest $1 million in your vision." I dropped the binder on the table in front of him. It landed with a heavy thud, causing him to jump. "Open it," I commanded. Kyle, shaking hand, reached out and flipped the cover open. His eyes scanned the first page. It was a copy of an arrest warrant issued by the Cobb County Sheriff's Office. Grand larceny, embezzlement, fraud. "You have been skimming from the construction supply company in Marietta for 2 years, I said, reciting the facts from memory. "Ordering lumber that never arrived, billing for hours that were never worked. $200,000, Kyle. That is a felony." Kyle's face turned gray. I was going to pay it back," he whispered. "It was a loan." "It is theft," I said, leaning closer. "And you have been dodging the warrant by moving from apartment to apartment." "Well, you do not have to run anymore." I pulled out my phone and placed it on the table. "I spoke with the Cobb County District Attorney this morning. He was very interested to know exactly where you would be at 9 a.m. today. There are 2 deputies waiting by the elevator right now. They have a pair of handcuffs with your name on them." Kyle looked at the door, panic rising in his chest. He looked at Ebony. "Baby, do something." Ebony recoiled from him. "You stole money?" she asked, horrified. "You told me you were a consultant." I did not let them finish. I picked up the second binder, the red one. I walked over to Latoya. She was clutching her fur stole like a shield, her eyes darting around the room looking for an exit. "And you, mother," I said, emphasizing the word with dripping sarcasm. "The woman with the bad back. The woman who needs a walker to get to the mailbox. The woman who needs my inheritance for spinal surgery." I dropped the binder in front of her. I opened it to the center page. It was a glossy 8x10 photograph. It showed Latoya at a wedding reception just last Saturday. She was in the middle of a dance circle, wearing high heels, doing a dip that would make a 20-year-old envious. She looked vibrant. She looked healthy. She definitely did not look disabled. Latoya gasped, covering the photo with her hand. That is photoshopped. That is not me." "It is you," I said. "And so is the video on the flash drive inside that cover. I sent a copy to the Social Security Administration Fraud Department this morning. You have collected over $100,000 in disability benefits while working under the table as a caterer and dancing on weekends." I leaned down until my face was inches from hers. "Federal insurance fraud, Latoya. That is a federal crime. They do not send you to the county jail for that. They send you to federal prison. No parole. And they seize your assets to pay back every dime. That townhouse you rent, that car you lease, it is all gone." Latoya started to cry, but this time the tears were real. They were the ugly, terrified tears of a woman who realizes her con is over. "Jasmine, baby, please," she sobbed, grabbing my sleeve. "I am your mother. You cannot send your mother to prison." "You sent a 5-year-old to a mall to fend for herself," I said, pulling my arm away. "You tried to send me to a psych ward to steal my money. You stopped being my mother a long time ago. Now you are just Defendant number 2. I turned to Darnell. He was the only one not crying. He was staring at me with a mixture of hatred and fear. He was trying to figure out if he could physically overpower me and run. He looked at the door, then at me. "You think you are smart," he growled. "So what? We grifted a little. Everyone does it. You cannot prove anything about me. I am clean." I smiled. It was a cold, sharp smile. "Oh, Darnell, I saved the best for you." I walked to the head of the conference table where a large flat-screen monitor was mounted on the wall. I picked up the remote. "You are right. The tax evasion was boring. The gambling debts were predictable. But yesterday, you made a mistake. You let your ego get the best of you. You wanted to show everyone who was boss." I pressed the power button. The screen flickered to life. It was the security footage from the courthouse lobby. It was high definition, crystal clear. It showed me walking away. It showed Darnell chasing me. It showed him grabbing my hair. And then, in slow motion, it showed him winding up and slapping me across the face with enough force to knock the cup from my hand. The sound had been recorded too. The crack of the slap echoed in the conference room. Darnell watched himself on the screen. He saw the anger in his own face. I pressed pause on the frame where his hand connected with my cheek. "Assaulting a civilian is a misdemeanor," I said, turning to face him. "But Darnell, you did not assault a civilian. You assaulted a superior court judge inside a courthouse in retaliation for her refusal to be extorted." I walked toward him. "That is a felony under Georgia Code 16-5-21. Aggravated assault on a judicial officer. Mandatory minimum sentence is 5 years. Maximum is 20. And since I am the victim and the witness and the judge who knows every prosecutor in this building, I can promise you, Darnell, you will serve every single day of the maximum." Darnell slumped in his chair. The fight went out of him. He looked old suddenly. He looked like the small, petty criminal he had always been. I did not know," he whispered. "I did not know you were a judge." "Ignorance of the law is no excuse," I said, repeating the words I had said to hundreds of defendants. "And ignorance of your own daughter worth is your tragedy." Jamadi stood up so fast his chair tipped over. He was grabbing papers, shoving them into his briefcase, not caring that he was wrinkling them. "I am out," he stammered, backing toward the door. "I am resigning as counsel, effective immediately. I have a conflict. I have a medical emergency. I have to go." He looked at me one last time, his eyes pleading. "Your Honor, I will send a formal letter of apology. I will donate to your re-election campaign. Just please, forget I was here." He did not wait for an answer. He turned and ran out of the room, leaving the door wide open. Through the open door, 2 uniformed deputies stepped in. They were not smiling. One of them held up a pair of handcuffs. "Kyle Anderson," one deputy said, "you are under arrest." Kyle started to wail. Ebony screamed. LaToya buried her face in her hands. I stood in the center of the chaos, the calm eye of the storm. I watched as the life they had built on lies crumbled around them. I watched as the justice they had tried to pervert came back to swallow them whole. Darnell looked up at me as the second deputy moved toward him. "Jasmine," he croaked. I looked at him. I touched the red lipstick on my swollen lip. "Goodbye, Darnell," I said. I turned my back on them and looked out the window at the Atlanta skyline. The sun was shining. It was going to be a beautiful day. The room erupted into absolute chaos the moment the deputies stepped through the doorframe. It was as if the air had been sucked out of the room and replaced with pure panic. Kyle was the first to break. When the cold steel of the handcuffs clicked around his wrists, the arrogant smirk he had worn for days vanished entirely. He did not go quietly. He collapsed onto his knees, sobbing loud, wet tears that stained his thrift store suit. He begged the officers, telling them he had asthma, telling them he was claustrophobic, telling them that he was just doing what his father-in-law told him to do. It was a pathetic display of a man who had spent his life bullying others, only to crumble the moment he faced a consequence. I watched from the head of the table, my hands resting calmly on the binders. I did not feel joy. I felt a cold, heavy sense of finality. LaToya was next. The deputy reading her rights mentioned the charges of federal wire fraud and the forfeiture of assets. The words federal prison seemed to hit her like a physical blow. She looked at her fur stole, then at me, then at the deputies. Her face went slack. Her eyes rolled back in her head, and she crumpled to the floor in a heap. It was not a performance this time. The reality of spending the next decade in a cell without her wigs, her makeup, or her audience had finally pierced her delusion. The paramedics would be called, but they would only be taking her as far as the infirmary at the county jail. Darnell was the last one standing. The deputies moved toward him, cautious and ready for a fight, but Darnell did not fight. He looked at his wife unconscious on the floor. He looked at his son-in-law weeping in cuffs, and then he looked at me. His eyes were wide, searching my face for a trace of the terrified little girl he had abandoned 30 years ago. He was looking for a crack in the armor. He was looking for mercy. "Jasmine," he rasped, his voice trembling. "I am your father. You cannot do this. Think about the family name. Think about what people will say." I stood up slowly, picking up the arrest warrant that lay on the table. I uncapped my fountain pen. It was a heavy black pen that Otis had given me when I graduated law school. He had saved for 6 months to buy it. "People will say that justice is blind, Darnell," I said, my voice steady and clear. "But they will also say that Judge Sterling has 20/20 vision when it comes to fraud." I looked him dead in the eye as I lowered the pen to the paper. "You traded your rights as a father for a trip to Miami in 1990, I said. Today I am just returning the favor." I signed my name at the bottom of the warrant. The scratching sound of the nib against the paper was the loudest thing in the room. It was the sound of a door slamming shut forever. "Take him away," I ordered. Darnell's shoulders slumped. He let the deputies turn him around. He let them cuff him. As he was marched out the door past the stunned secretaries and the gawking interns, he did not look back. He just looked at the floor. A man who had bet everything on greed and lost it all to the daughter he threw away. I stood alone in the conference room, surrounded by the empty chairs and the scattered papers. The silence was beautiful. It was not the silence of abandonment. It was the silence of a clean slate. I picked up the picture of Otis from my binder and tucked it into my pocket. It was done. 6 months later, the heat of the Atlanta summer had given way to a crisp autumn breeze. I parked my Volvo in front of the house on Martin Luther King Boulevard. It did not look like the same house anymore. The faded siding had been replaced with fresh, cheerful blue paint. The overgrown bushes were gone, replaced by flower beds bursting with yellow marigolds. Above the front door, a modest wooden sign hung from "This house was a safe haven for children who had been forgotten, just like I was." It was a place where no child would ever feel like a burden because of a price tag. I walked through the house, greeting the staff and the kids. I felt a lightness in my chest that I hadn't felt in decades. This was my inheritance. This was the legacy Otis deserved. I walked back out to the front porch to check the mail. Across the street, a county work van had pulled up. A crew of people in bright orange vests were picking up litter along the sidewalk. They were serving their court-ordered community service hours. My eyes locked onto a figure near the fire hydrant. She was wearing oversized sunglasses, trying to hide her face, but I recognized the posture. It was Ebony. She was the only one who had escaped prison because she hadn't signed the fraudulent documents. But the civil court had stripped her of everything else. The lawsuit for defamation and intentional infliction of emotional distress had bankrupted her. Her car was gone. Her social media accounts had been permanently banned for harassment. She was living in a studio apartment, working 2 minimum-wage jobs to pay off the judgment she owed me. She stabbed a piece of trash with her stick and looked up. She saw me standing on the porch of the beautiful renovated house. She saw the sign with Otis's name. She saw the peace on my face. For a moment, I thought she might scream. I thought she might try to pull out a phone that she no longer had. But she just lowered her head, her shoulders hunched over in defeat. The shame was palpable even from across the street. She turned away, focusing on a discarded soda can on the ground. She was finally learning the value of hard work, something Otis had tried to teach us both. I did not gloat. I did not smile. I just watched her for a moment, acknowledging the tragedy of her choices, and then I turned back to the house that love built. That evening, as the sun began to dip below the horizon, painting the Atlanta sky in shades of purple and gold, I sat on the back porch in Otis's old rocking chair. I had a cup of peppermint tea in my hand, steaming in the cool air. The kids were inside, settling down for movie night. I rocked back and forth, the rhythmic creak of the wood sounding like a heartbeat. For 35 years, I had carried a hole in my heart. I had spent my life trying to prove that I was worthy of being kept. I had thought that if I was smart enough, if I was successful enough, maybe my biological family would finally see me. I had thought that their rejection was a reflection of my value. But as I looked out over the yard, where fireflies were starting to blink in the twilight, I realized the truth. Darnell and Latoya and Ebony believed that blood was the only thing that mattered. They thought that shared DNA gave them ownership over my life and my success. They thought family was a right they were born with. They were wrong. Blood is just biology. It is just cells and genetic code. It is an accident of birth. Family is a choice. Family is the man who stays when he does not have to. Family is the person who works an extra shift to buy you a piano. Family is the person who holds your hand when you are sick, not the one who asks for a check. Otis Sterling was my father in every way that mattered. He did not give me his eyes or his height, but he gave me his integrity. He gave me his heart. And in the end, he gave me the power to save myself and all the children sleeping safely inside his house tonight. I took a sip of tea, feeling the warmth spread through my chest. They had lost a daughter. They had lost a sister. And they had lost their freedom. But I had found something far more valuable than $3 million. I had found the truth. I smiled, looking up at the first star appearing in the darkening sky. "Good night, Pop," I whispered. "We did good." I continued to rock, listening to the sounds of the city and the laughter of my true family, knowing that for the first time in my life, I was exactly where I was supposed to be, and no one could ever take that away from me again. My journey proved that family is defined by behavior, not biology. The Jenkins clan believed their DNA gave them a right to my success, but they learned that you cannot withdraw from an emotional bank account you never deposited into. True wealth isn't the $3 million Otis left me. It is the integrity to stand alone and the wisdom to know my own value. If you are holding on to toxic people just because you share a last name, let this be your sign to let go. You are not responsible for carrying the people who dropped you. If you believe that loyalty must be earned, please like this video and subscribe for more stories of justice served.